Thanks for tuning in to the Big Nose Podcast, a platform for me to nose into other people's business. On this podcast, I strive to share with you stories from a range of different people over various different topics. So, before my nose starts twitching any further, let's get down to business. Hello and welcome to the Big Nose Podcast. This week I am delighted to be joined by singer-songwriter and Kildare native, maybe most importantly, Megan O'Neill. Possibly one of the busiest people in music in the last 12 months. It's great to have you on the show today. And before we get into your whole story, Megan, I just wanted to kind of reflect on the last 12 months maybe and compared to the people in your industry. I've spoken to different people on previous episodes of this podcast who have found it quite challenging, but you seem to be quite the busy woman over the last 12 months. How has it been for you?
Yeah, it's been amazing and really challenging at the same time.
Yeah.
Like for everybody, you know, there's been big benefits of this period of time for me and big, you know, issues and challenges with the time. I was really fortunate though because I'd finished an album like a month before the pandemic kind of hit. So it meant I had a product ready to go, I had something to promote, and I was then able to kind of consistently release music every 8 to 10 weeks over the course of the last year. But yeah, I remember like when it all kicked off last March, I was playing, I had an incredible start to 2020. I'd signed on with a huge agency in London, and I started working with a new lawyer, and I was in meetings with different managers all the time, and I'd finished I'd been working on one album, I'd finished 2 albums. One was a compilation album for Universal, and one was my own album. And both of them were meant to be coming out in 2020, as well as 100 plus shows. So it was going to be the busiest year of my career to date. I was pretty, scared of the year ahead. I remember like starting into 2020 and going, shit, how am I going to get through all this? Like, this is so much work. And the beginning of 2020, I'd opened up for a couple of huge names. Like, I'd done the Olympia, which was a dream of mine forever, with the Lighthouse family. And the night that all of this kicked off, I remember it was the 9th of March, and I was opening for Jamie Cullum at the Board Gosh. I had just come back from being abroad doing some shows, and the way home was really like, ooh, there's something happening in the air. And my boyfriend at the time was on his way to France to play a bunch of gigs. And it was all really like weird. And I remember when the whole world shut down, thinking, oh my God, great, I get 2 weeks off.
2 weeks holidays.
That was my thought pattern. I was like, I can rest for 2 weeks and then be ready to do all of these, 9 months of touring. Like, it's going to be class. And here we are.
2 weeks, 2 weeks, 52 weeks later.
Yeah, exactly. And like, there's definitely, I suppose I had so much momentum going and so much kind of in my favor going on when this all hit. And then it was incredibly frustrating because it takes years and years and years to build up that kind of momentum. And then it was swept from underneath me by no fault of my own. So I was naturally raging. But then I was like, you know what? I have an album ready to go. I didn't do what a lot of people did, which was kind of sit on the music and wait till touring came back to release. I was like, screw it. I'm going to release a single every 2 months. I'm going to be doing loads of kind of online streaming. I'm going to put out the album. Yeah, that's worked really well for me. I've been really fortunate that a lot of things have kind of spiraled in a great way.
As you said, you had an opportunity. You had to kind of replace yourself within how you were going to get it out, where you're going to get it out. Obviously, you couldn't get it out now in terms of, pushing it in terms of doing an international tour. You couldn't go down that road, but it was a case of, like, you had the music, hold on to it and sit on to it, as many have done, or you could release it and get people familiar with your music, I suppose, as well. Maybe going back a bit, Megan, in terms of, as I said in your introduction, you are a Kildare native, and a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. What was it like growing up for you in terms of your family, your childhood, growing up in Kildare? What was it like? Was there music in your family?
Yeah, so my family, like my mum would be big into music, and she would have been kind of my music educator when I was a kid. Like, right. We would be driving around in the car and she would always have blaring out the radio like Joni Mitchell, Carole King, Mary Black, The Corrs, Stevie Nicks, like Queen, just amazing music, Billy Joel. And so it's only now that I realise actually how influential that was for me as a young girl, really interested in music. I was playing loads of different instruments, and I was, started playing in bands when I was about 14, had no idea what I was doing, but was having fun. And how influential it was to be brought up listening to powerhouse women in the music industry. Amazing female songwriters, amazing female artists, lots of male artists as well, but my mom was very pro-female.
Yeah.
And that had, I think, like, subconsciously, that had a huge influence on me, and probably my ability to think, like, I can do this, There's loads of great women on the radio, I can do this. So, yeah, I grew up, and I, like every kid, like, wanted to play piano 1 week, guitar 1 week, violin 1 week, blah, blah.
Did you ever get to the drums?
No, I didn't.
I got drums one year. I like you, went through guitar, I had a keyboard, piano, and then one year I asked Santa Claus for the drums, and luckily enough, I think, or maybe not luckily enough, the neighbours on one side were actually deaf. That was okay if I had the drums, but you never got to the drums, no?
I never did. I kind of wish I did.
And still plenty of time.
Like, being a female drummer is pretty badass. But no, I didn't. I tried loads of different things, and then the one thing that my mum just persisted and made me stick at was the piano. Yeah. And I wanted to give up the piano. Like, I fought with her tooth and nail every year from when I was about 12 to give it up. But I was big into horses at the time, and she was like, if you want to keep horse riding, you have to keep doing piano. And that was the bribe.
Bribery works.
Bribery works.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I was really lucky to grow up in a family that were like, you love this? Okay, great. Let's get you more into this. And there was a big support system there for something that I clearly got so much enjoyment out of, and also loved to do, like, was good at, and would naturally gravitate towards. When I'd come home from school, I'd go straight in and play the piano and be writing songs from a young age. So
yeah, I think growing up, like, as any teenager, and trying to, music plays either a conscious or a subconscious level, music in some part of our lives growing up. And if you're like yourself, maybe where you have a natural gravitation towards music, and you're in a household that actually helps harness that love you have and be able to push it in the right direction. Okay, bribery with horse riding might have been the counterpunch for it. What type of music was it that you were interested in? I know you were saying your mum had all the female powerhouses, but was there any musical influences you had growing up?
Yeah, loads. Like, I loved listening to, for me, it was always the stories behind the songs, and it still is. Like, yeah. I find just the stories, the lyrical content of songs is what always gets me. And I remember the first album that I ever bought with my own money was Home by the Dixie Chicks.
Nice.
And I literally played that CD to death. Like, I think it just died one day because I played it so much. But, like, the lyrics, it was always the lyrics. And I remember from a really young age, like, sitting there and crying over beautiful lyrics that I didn't even understand, that I couldn't even relate to at the age of 11 or whatever. I just loved the stories from a really early age. And I think that's something I've really tried to adopt in my own songwriting, that the stories, take center stage. They are the most important part for me.
Yeah, obviously then, as you said, the story is important to you, and how you can put the words together to communicate maybe a feeling or emotion that is important in the song, and then being able to put the music to it or whatever, or whichever way it works is great. But it's one thing doing that as a teenager, and then all of a sudden, you're getting a little bit older, you're going through school, you're going to college, whatever it is, and then it's a decision you have to make whether you're going to back yourself or how you're going to go down and make a career out of it. Because it's one thing being an interest or a hobby growing up, but it's a different thing when you're trying to make some money out of it. How did you decide, or when was the light bulb moment, as they say, that you wanted to go down a career path in terms of a singer-songwriter?
For me, I don't know that there was ever a conscious decision.
Yeah.
That there was ever a moment where I said, this is what I'm going to do. I think it was literally, it was like a pull. It was just, I just had to do it. And I think as well as that, I remember I studied psychology in college. I went to UCD, and my parents were, as much as they were supportive of my love of music, in those very early days, they certainly were not pushing me into doing it as a career, because they were like, it's so hard, it's so competitive, like, we're going to be worrying about you for the rest of your life. Like, where are you going to make a living? And I understand that, because if I had kids, I'd do exactly the same thing. But I went to UCD and I was like, right, I'll get the, quote unquote real degree. I was 2 weeks in university, and my mum rang me and she said, Megan, did you know they have a singing scholarship at UCD? And I was like, no, didn't know that. Okay. And she said,
mums are great.
Mums are great. Irish mammies all the way. She was like, yeah, they've got a singing scholarship, maybe you should apply. And I was like, okay, sure, screw, I'll throw my hat in the ring, why not?
Yeah.
And I remember showing up for the audition, and it was a chamber choir. They gave away like 16 scholarships every year with whatever, 20,000 students I think there are in UCD. Yeah. So it was highly competitive, and it was classical singing. And I'd never sung classical before. I was able to sight read because I played piano, but I'd never sung. I'd never sight sung, and being able to stare at a piece of music and sing it directly off the page. So I went for the audition, and everybody else around me was classically trained, had been in like the World Youth Choir, like everyone else was a genius, and I was like,
what am I doing here?
Way in over my head here.
But I'm here anyway.
I got it. I got offered it, and Desmond Early, who's the musical director, saw something in me, and I'm so grateful for that, because that was an unbelievable just amount of training in those 3 years. There was so much training vocally and musically, and just with theory, with everything. And I got to travel with the university to different countries and be in competitions and do different arrangements of pop songs in like this choir. It was amazing. And then when I graduated, I was like, right, I'm going to move to Nashville. And my parents were like, are you joking? Like, you just got a degree. Will you not just go and do a master's like a normal person? I was like, nope, here we go. And I guess that for me, that was the turning point.
Yeah.
Because I could have very easily gone and gotten a master's and gone into psychology. I really liked it.
Yeah.
But that for me was I suppose that was the moment. But it
was kind of like the fork in the roads, and you took the less travelled in that sense.
And it was a pretty steep fork. Like it was, I made that decision, and I was like jumping down a rabbit hole, and was really hard to come back from, because I then got to Nashville and I was so immersed in this amazing industry that I loved so much, and then I just couldn't reverse. There was no road back to where that fork had come from. As you've alluded to, you've obviously in more recent years been living outside of Ireland, between LA and London, and it really follows a trend, if you look back at a lot of successful artists, that it's important to live outside of Ireland and expose yourself to international influences. Do you think it's important for your career to go outside of Ireland and expose yourself to this? Yeah, I think it was for me. I mean, first of all, living in Nashville was like the most amazing education you could ever ask for as a songwriter, because everybody around you is phenomenal. Like, I went there completely naively and very green and didn't really know what I was doing, and I went there naively thinking like, oh, I'll get a deal in the first 6 months that I'm there, obviously. And not in a cocky way, just that I didn't know enough about the industry. I just thought that's how
just
it
what
worked.
happened. Yeah,
and then holy cow, I got there and I was like, oh my god, this is the most humbling experience I could have ever asked for. Everyone is amazing, and it made me realize the amount of work that you have to put in to be a successful songwriter, artist, musician, producer, engineer, anyone in the music industry is leaps and bounds beyond what I originally thought.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate when I was there, because I was essentially kind of taken under the wing of some amazing people in the industry. Like, I was so fortunate to be brought into these incredible circles, really influential songwriters, labels and publishers, and like, I was really fortunate I was there at the right time. I met the right people.
Yeah.
And I was just able to be a sponge.
Yeah.
I was just able to take everything and learn everything.
And that was
But it
never
was
likely to happen in
tough,
Ireland,
man. Like, no, I don't think that was likely to happen here. And but I never necessarily tried, and that's the thing. I
yeah,
never actually tried here to dive into the industry. I think I just wanted. I was 21 and I wanted a sense of adventure and I wanted to live abroad and I wanted to travel, and that came into it as well. You know, those life experiences came into it. And I think for me as well, being such a huge fan of like roots music
yeah.
and really wanting to learn how to write stories, Nashville just called me.
Yeah, it was a calling card. It was an opportunity to immerse yourself within a culture and kind of feed off the wealth of knowledge that was naturally apparent in Nashville. With the release last week of your latest album, Getting Comfortable with Uncertainty, which I think is probably the best named album I've heard in a long, long time. There's a song on it, Ireland, which I've seen a lot this week. A lot of people have picked it up, it being St. Patrick's week. You go through it and you spoke earlier about, the lyrics, and I actually printed it out in work and I read through it rather than listening to it. And if you read through it, it's kind of, it's like it reads as it's a love letter. Would you describe it as a letter about your relationship with Ireland? How would you best describe it yourself?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It is a love letter to Ireland for me, because at the time that I wrote that, I was living away for about 6 years. I'd been in Nashville for 2 and then London for 5 in the end. And I wrote that when I was still living in London, about a year before I moved home. And like growing up in Ireland, I grew up in a tiny town where everybody knows your business and half the people who live here are my cousins. And I couldn't wait to see what else the world had to offer.
Yeah.
When I was young, I wanted to get out. I wanted to explore. I thought Ireland was small. I thought it was a bit small-minded in ways. But that was my own being a teenager and thinking, everything, and thinking,
Yeah.
You can go, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
the grass is always greener on your side.
You're always like, yeah. And you're always like, God, I can't wait to get out of here. And it was only after a few years abroad that I was like, oh my God, I miss the smell of the Irish air.
Yeah.
I miss everybody knowing my name. I miss the silly, like, I'm sorry, I mean everybody knowing my name as in, like, not because I'm a celebrity, but because everybody in the town knows me. Like, I miss the lingo. I miss chatting about ga and school and, like, how Irish people just get each other's humour. I miss the sarcasm. I miss my family. I definitely had so many moments. I used to come home from London to Ireland from London fairly regularly. Every time I had to get back on the plane to London, I would cry.
Really?
Wow. And it wasn't because I loved London and I loved my life in London, but my heart was always here.
Yeah.
And I always knew I'd come back. And so that song for me, like, I'll take your rain instead of sun, the green of your hills in the summer that never lasts long. The things that, like, I thought I wanted to get away from. And then I was like, I'd take all of that again and again to just be back.
There's a real sense of realization as you read through the words of someone who had maybe an interpretation of what they wanted to feel, but when they went and explored the world, that as small as the rock is back on the side of the Atlantic Ocean, it is only home, and that really comes through in the lyrics. It's a really powerful song.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the first song I ever wrote on guitar, and it was probably the quickest song I've ever written as well. It was like just an outpouring of emotion in 15-20 minutes, and then it was done.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes songs just happen that way when you really feel them,
As we alluded to, living away from home seems very attractive and exciting at the start, and with social media, as powerful and as great as it is, it does play a large part of our lives. The need to keep up appearances can be very hard and challenging. Did you find this was a reality, or did you struggle with being away from home and trying to make sure that the mammy wasn't too worried about you?
Oh God, my mom has 5 kids, so she only has a fifth of her to worry about me. But she I don't know. I think I'm a very open, honest person, and I think I'm usually quite honest about what I feel, whether that's on social media or whether that's in real life. But I'm very aware of, like, the constant comparison we all do with other people because of social media, and I hate that.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, I try to be a more honest version of myself. And like, I have no problem telling people that when I moved to London, I cried almost every day for the first 6 months I lived there. I hated it. And it was so lonely. It was so big. It was so scary. It was like, I felt like nobody. And coming from somewhere where you feel like you belong so much, going to a city the size of London is really hard. So I didn't really feel the need to romanticize that.
Yeah.
But I suppose when you come back to Ireland, everybody romanticizes it for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're like, oh, sure, isn't it great now you're off in London having a great time? And even if you're not having a great time, you have to be like, yeah, I am living the dream.
That's refreshing because, as I said, there's a lot of content online and on social media that, everything is grand until such a time as, you close the door and you're sitting in your apartment in London and you're crying for the first 6 months. Bit of a more technical question. I'm moving towards the architecture of writing songs. Last week you released the album Getting Comfortable with Uncertainty, and it has, I think, 13 songs. I wanted to understand more, and maybe the listeners would probably get a better sense of how you go about writing an album.
Writing an album is a serious undertaking. Christ. I think everybody does it differently. I write very regularly. I would write 2-3 songs every week, sometimes more. And unless I'm taking a week off, I would never really write less than 2 songs a week.
Wow.
Songwriting is a muscle. Just like if I sit down to play piano every day, I'm going to be better at it. And if I sit down to write a song every day, I'm going to be better at it. And naturally, you're going to have days where you're not as creative, you're not flowing as much, the energy isn't there as much. But I am a big believer in consistency, and I'm a big believer in sitting down to exercise that muscle regularly. So, like, for Getting Comfortable with Uncertainty, this album, I think we originally started with 80 or 90 songs that had been written over, a year period. And then I took those into studio and I narrowed them down until we got to about 20. And then with those 20 songs, I sat down with Joe and Dave Dunwell, who produced the album, and we picked our favourite, 12 to work with. And Time in a Bottle was added as a bonus track later. Now, lots of people work differently in this process of recording. I kind of work in the sense of, like, I'll write loads and then the ones that stay on top are the ones that I know are going to go on the record. So, like, I probably have about 500 songs that nobody will ever hear, and it's a crying shame. Maybe one day I'll put them out there.
But it must be very difficult to and it must be a process of being self-critiquing and trying to understand, do these songs go together on one album? First of all, do they tell a story, or is it a case of, are we just picking the best songs that we think will do best commercially? It must be kind of a process in terms of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And I think it's about how they tell together as a story. Like, an album is a piece of time. It's like it's like a book that is going to be the story of this year or 2 year period. And so it's hard to, I couldn't just stick another song on there that didn't fit with the overall concept. And I'm doing that again. Like, I'm about to go into studio in the next few weeks to work on the next record. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually having these conversations all over again, which is, I'm ready to do that because this last album was finished a good while ago. And it's not always about, I really like this song and I really like this song, and so they're both going to go on. It's about, like, but how is this song going to gel with this song? And how are they going to tell a story together if this is all going to be one body of work?
As we alluded to at the start of the conversation, 2020 was supposed to be your year. International tours, UK, Ireland, across the globe, to Australia, New Zealand. Wouldn't we all love to be there now? But performing in front of a live audience, in-person audience, is something that's so attractive about your industry. Maybe engaging every night. I know you might be playing the same playlist, but it's different crowds, different responses. It must be something that you miss really, really, really terribly at the moment.
It's actually weird because we've just announced a tour of the UK and Ireland for this winter, for October, November, and there's more dates that will soon be announced for Germany and for hopefully New Zealand and Australia, if that can happen in December. And a part of me is looking at those dates and being like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And another part of me is terrified because it's been so long.
Yeah.
I really do miss it. I really miss, like, as a musician, especially a touring musician, you have friends all over the world that you only see when you tour.
Yeah.
So like, I have friends all over the UK and in New Zealand and in America and in mainland Europe that I only ever see when I tour, and that I've gotten to know through that touring process, whether they're musicians or engineers or promoters or whatever. And I haven't seen any of them, so that I'm really excited about. And I am definitely drained of the live streams. They are tough going, and I know that they're a great way to engage, and it's been amazing for me throughout the last year to do those live streams because it's allowed me this avenue to connect with my fans everywhere in the world. But you actually give twice as much in that live stream than you would in an actual live gig, because you're getting nothing back. It's just all give. And so I really miss that about it, a room of people that you can actually sit there and have banter and have a bit of crack and have all the energy be in that room, and you know everybody's, well, you hope everybody's having a good time. I'm really excited to get back to it. I'm nervous. It's been a long time, and the thoughts of playing to a venue with a band and all of the things that go with that as well, like all the tour planning, doing radio each morning, driving 6 hours between each show, having to plan every single minute of the 6 weeks that you're on tour. Like it's grueling, it's exhausting, and it's also really fun. So like, I'm nervous about all the elements of being back on tour. I'm like, I hope I'm able for that. I hope I have the energy to do that again.
Well, this is it, because you're coming from a place where it's not a case you've had a year off or you've had time off. It's a case of you've probably never been actually busier, you know, going into performing live gigs where, as you said, you've been promoting yourself, you've been releasing albums, you're writing now again. So it's a case of, will I be ready physically as much as mentally?
Yeah, it really is, and I think I will have to be really careful with scheduling in a break before I go back out on tour, because at the moment, like it's a good complaint to have that I'm busy, but because I'm, you know, a self-releasing artist, at the moment I am the artist, I'm the songwriter, I'm the creative director, I'm the manager, I'm the label, I'm the publisher, I'm the sync agent, like I'm everything.
HR.
And yeah, HR, absolutely. And social media, everything. And I think, you know, people underestimate. I've had lots of people throughout my career think like, oh, sure, isn't it great? You just get to rock up and play a show. And I'm like, if you knew the amount of work that goes into keeping this all going, like it's very tiring, because I've had a lot of successes come in over the last few months, which I'm so grateful for, and I'm so excited about. Things are coming in that are time sensitive, that are, you know, sessions for writing for different artists, writing for briefs and TV, and they're all very time sensitive at the same time as writing for yourself and promoting yourself and releasing an album, and like even simple things like postaging and packaging CDs, like that all takes a lot of time. And at the moment I'm definitely, you know, pulling from my own reserves. I'm at the bottom of my well, so I will have to be really conscious before I go back out on these tours to take a proper period of time.
Phone off, email off, no phone calls.
I'm really bad at doing that though. My God, I'm terrible.
I'm with you on that one. I wanted to ask you, actually, obviously, as you said, the last 2 months have been phenomenal in terms of, you know, exposing yourself, your music, and I was looking at you on the Late Late Show and I was thinking, it must be a dream to perform on the Late Late Show, but it must have been a really eerie experience to perform there, but not to perform to anybody, if you know what I mean, even though it was 2 million people sitting at home.
Yeah, weird. Like the Late Late Show in Ireland is an institution. Like it's, you know, it's a big thing that a lot of artists are, you know, that's a huge career milestone. And it was for me. It had been something I'd been wanting to do for such a long time, and getting to do that was huge. I loved every minute of it, but yeah, it was weird. It was eerie. You were performing to a room of people who were, you know, the engineers and the camera crew and everybody that was working at RT, and everybody in masks and everybody in, you know, behind shields and socially distanced. And it was odd to not be able to have like, oh my God, we would have had some party if that was a regular night, you know?
I could only
I would have been going to Coppers in my dress. That's what would have been happening.
Yeah.
And, you know, my family would have been up, they would have been in the audience, like, it would have been amazing. And it would have really marked the occasion. Whereas without the ability, and everyone is finding that now in every way, without the ability to mark an occasion,
yeah,
it can be very anticlimactic. Like, you just come home,
yeah,
have a glass of wine, and you're like, oh,
yeah, you're getting
okay.
You're getting stolen of memories you'll never have, but you know what I mean. The memories that you thought you might create aren't being created, and hopefully the next time you're on, I'm sure the next time you're on, we'll be all up dancing and singing, and
oh, we better.
Absolutely, and I'll see you in Coppers. On the new album, there's a song that you obviously performed on the Late Late Show. It's a cover, and it's on the album as well, Time in a Bottle. To me, it has notes of a Dick Van Dyke Push It By Mountain in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. But my question to you is, what brought you to cover a song such as this that goes back to 1973, I think?
Yeah, so Time in a Bottle is, you know, to me, one of the most gorgeous songs ever written. Yeah. And it was actually one of my mother's favourite songs when I was growing up. She had a Jim Croces vinyl, like, a long time ago. I think she still has it somewhere in the house, actually. And basically, the reason I decided to cover it was that I was approached by the creators of this show, Firefly Lane, that was going to be on Netflix. Approached by some of the people that were working on the show. They wanted a female version of Time in a Bottle, and they couldn't find any that they liked. So usually what happens in these scenarios is they contact a few people and they say, hey, can you do a version, send it to us. And it could be you and 500 other people they ask to do it, or it could be you and 3 other people, you don't know, but you throw your hat in the ring, and for these briefs, we would call them. And with this one, like, I got the brief through and I was like, right, I'm gonna try, and I'm going to throw my hat in the ring for this one. I love this song. Like, I think I could do a really good job of it. So I rang up my friend Mark Kaplis, who produced the track and features on the track with me. And I was like, Mark, got this brief through, female version of Time in a Bottle. Like, I would really like to do it with you. So I went up to his studio and we talked about it. We threw around a lot of ideas. And my big thing with this cover was... And I don't do very many covers. Like, the whole rest of the album is all original songs, and I would very rarely release. I think I've released 3 covers maybe, or 4 in my whole career. And my big thing with this one was, it's a very precious song to a lot of people, and a lot of people would be like, oh no, that's untouchable. Like, don't cover that song. Like Fairy Tale in New York, which I also did. And
someone should have told Ronan Keating.
So my big thing was, it needs to be different enough from the original and unique enough that it's not upsetting people that are so close to the original. So we threw around a lot of ideas, and then we turned off all the lights in the studio, lit some candles, and went for a take. And it was so much more important for us to capture the emotion than it was to, like, get everything perfect. So, like, what you hear is that one full take. And we didn't even do it to a metronome. It's not even in time. Like, it's all, you know, but it's emotional, and it's otherworldly, and that's what we wanted. And then it got picked for the Netflix show, so absolutely delighted.
Yeah, it's funny you say, like, it was just the one take, like, and it was driven by emotion. It's definitely a song and that just fills the room with emotion. You can't not but stop and listen to it. And I haven't watched the series, but by all interpretations it's going well. I read somewhere it has 1.2 billion minute views on Netflix.
I know. I saw that and I was like, I can't even comprehend that number. Like, how many people have actually heard me sing is scary.
No, I'm sure the life is much better for it. When you look towards, I know we've touched on a little bit in the last hour, the future for Megan O'Neill. What does it look like? What's on the agenda? Obviously, you have released the album. Where can they get the album?
And they can get it on my website, which is megan-o'neill.com, and I think it's /store. And they can also get it on Bandcamp. And when I get back out on tour, they can get physical copies of it as well.
Brilliant. And you did say that you hope to be touring later this year?
Yeah, we've announced dates for October and November across Ireland and the UK, and then there's more to be announced soon.
Brilliant.
So they're
And
all those tickets are on sale already.
so you can check them out for the dates that are online. In terms of yourself, what's the hope for the next? Maybe what's the plan? I don't know if we can plan. Maybe it's a hope for the next year, 18 months for yourself.
I am so fortunate to be able to say that I absolutely love what I'm doing. I am so happy with the songs I'm writing, the people I get to collaborate with, the people that are on my team. I'm thrilled with what this past year has been career wise, and probably not personal wise, but career wise. There's a lot of things that I just want to keep growing from where I currently am. So I'm looking forward to getting back in the studio, working on the next record, which is happening in April. And the first single will be released from that probably in September time. I'm really looking forward to playing gigs again. And I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I just want to make this more sustainable. Ideally, if I could, clone myself and have two of myself, and one of me could manage the other one of me, that would be really ideal because it's fairly exhausting trying to do it all yourself. But I just want to keep doing what I'm doing, keep growing, and keep. I'd love to be working more with, like we did for Time in a Bottle, songs for TV and movie, which have moved into quite a bit in the last few months.
Brilliant.
And songwriting for other artists as well, which is always such an interesting thing to work with another artist and bring their story to life in a beautiful way. So just to keep going the way I'm going, really.
keep trucking, I think, is what they say. I think, Megan, It's been great to talk to you. I think everything that you do with a huge degree of passion and positivity. It definitely comes across from talking to you. It definitely comes across in terms of watching what you do on social media and the music that you do put out and the songs that you are writing. It's really a breath of fresh air, and in a time where we could all do with that, I would implore people to check out Megan on Instagram. Go and get her music in your ears, as they say, and you will definitely be better for it. Megan, it's great to have you on the Big Nose podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.